Welcome, my friend. You've been taught that strength is something you must chase, that it's found in muscle, in tension, in domination. But what if I told you that everything you believe about strength is a carefully constructed illusion? That what we call power is often just fear wrapped in armor. In this special 10-part podcast series, Strength is an Illusion, Becoming Water, we'll journey through the quiet truths that martial arts, and life itself, have whispered to me over decades of discipline, failure, revelation, and rebirth. In Chapter 1, you'll witness a silent moment that shattered the myth of strength. In Chapter 2, the secret behind a 1-inch movement that changed the world. Chapters 3 and 4 dive into the prisons we build from ego, and the lessons hidden inside defeat. In Chapter 5, we'll confront fear, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. By Chapter 6, you'll see how strength collapses so something real can emerge. Chapters 7 through 10 guide you through injury, surrender, flow, and finally, the ultimate breakthrough. Realizing that true power was never something to attain, it was something to release. This is not a manual, it's a mirror, a conversation not just about martial arts, but about you, your life, your identity, your freedom. So empty your cup. Forget what you think you know. Let's begin. Be water, my friend. Chapter 1. The First Clash with Strength. Let me take you back. Hong Kong, 1964. The summer air clung to the skin, thick with heat and expectation. My training hall, my sacred space, was filled with the scent of old wood, dried sweat, and the quiet resolve of discipline. That day, an unexpected guest arrived, a man of sheer mass and muscle. A 300-pound mountain carved by decades of relentless repetition and physical devotion. His arms, thick as tree trunks, his gaze, unwavering, his silence said more than any threat ever could. The room filled quickly. Students gathered on the sides of the mat. Some stood, some knelt. No one spoke above a whisper. They knew what was about to happen. A test, a confrontation, an unspoken question. Who is truly stronger? He came to test me, to measure his years of strength against what he had heard whispered about, my style, my movement, my philosophy. What he didn't know was that I had already learned not to meet strength with strength. He threw a punch, not just a punch, the kind that demolishes bricks and stuns spectators. But I didn't block it. I didn't counter. I simply wasn't there. His knuckles struck nothing but air. His momentum, his force, his fury, lost in the emptiness where he expected contact. And in that moment, his eyes changed, his breath caught, his body, for the first time in decades, was uncertain. It wasn't his defeat that changed me. It was the realization of what I didn't need. Strength, at least, the kind he brought, wasn't truth. It was performance. It was armor. It was a story told by bodies trying to protect fragile minds. What moved me forward wasn't resistance. It was release, the absence of opposition. That day, I didn't win. I simply disappeared from his narrative. And in doing so, I shattered the illusion he had built around what it meant to be powerful. I had become what he could not strike. Formless, ungraspable, free. Chapter 2. 1 inch. Infinite impact. They called it a miracle. The 1-inch punch. I remember the first time I demonstrated it publicly, Long Beach, California. The crowd leaned in. Skeptics in the back crossed their arms. Cameras waited for movement, and with what looked like a flick, an effortless extension of my arm, my opponent flew backward. People gasped. They whispered, "That's not possible." But it was never about force. It was about refinement. It was the culmination of thousands of hours practicing not to strike harder, but to remove all that was unnecessary. The truth? The first 100 times I attempted the 1-inch punch, I failed, miserably. I was tense. I clenched every muscle, thinking that tension equaled power. But tension is a trap. The more I tried, the less it worked. It wasn't until I let go of the idea that power had to come from muscle, from strain, from brute effort, that the punch began to take shape. Not through me, but in spite of me. When I performed the technique correctly, it felt like the universe itself was striking. My body became a vessel. My intention became alignment. My force, instead of erupting outward, traveled inward first, through the floor, through the hips, through the spine, and only then, outward in a wave. It was not magic. It was mastery over one's own resistance. True impact is not found in excess. It is found in essence. In the inch between desire and execution. Between effort and surrender. Chapter 3. The Prison of Strength. Here's the tragedy. We are taught to idolize strength from childhood. Told to man up, to push through, to never show weakness. We admire the conqueror, the undefeated, the statues carved from granite. But what we don't realize is that most of these symbols are brittle underneath. They are imprisoned by the very image they project. I once faced a man built like a monument, massive biceps, chiseled abs, legs like pistons. He was proud, and rightly so. He had spent years building his fortress. But the problem with fortresses is they don't move. And the moment something cannot move, it becomes vulnerable. He grabbed my wrist, fully expecting to overpower me. But in doing so, he anchored himself to me. While he clung tightly, I was already slipping out, redirecting his tension back into him. It wasn't about who had more muscle. It was about who had more freedom. And that's what strength, when misunderstood, takes from us: freedom. It turns the body into a wall and the mind into a locked cell. True power isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how well you listen. To your body, to your opponent, to the space between. Chapter 4. Lessons from defeat. Defeat is a teacher, a cruel one, but honest. I remember a time, early in my journey, when I fought a master who barely moved. No matter how fast I attacked, he wasn't there. His counters were so subtle I doubted they even existed. But they did. I felt them. I just didn't see them. I left that day bruised, not just physically, but spiritually, because I had come into the fight with something to prove. And when you fight to prove, you lose before you begin. Every punch I threw was a question. Every dodge he made was an answer. And every answer said the same thing: you're not ready. But I listened. I reflected. And slowly, I realized that what I lacked wasn't skill, it was emptiness. I had no room for new insight. My cup was full of ego. So I poured it out. All of it. I stopped asking, how'd I beat him? And started asking, what am I holding on to? And in that space, where defeat had broken the surface, growth began. Chapter 5. The Armor of Fear. Fear wears many disguises, but its favorite is strength. We lift more, push harder, grow louder, because deep down, we're terrified. Terrified of being seen, of being vulnerable, of being enough without performance. One of my students, a police officer, came to me after a fight he lost on the street. He had the training, the techniques, the physical edge, but he froze. He said to me, I don't know what happened. My body didn't move. I asked him, what were you afraid of? He paused, and then he cried. It wasn't the opponent he feared, it was failure. Judgment, the voice in his head saying, you're supposed to be better than this. That's what fear does. It doesn't just stop your punch. It stops your truth. When we wear strength like armor, we may look powerful, but we become emotionally paralyzed. Real courage is not in clenching the fist. It's in opening the hand. Chapter 6. The Collapse of Empty Strength. I once paired one of my best students with a total beginner. He resisted at first, felt insulted. But I insisted. What followed was more than a sparring session. It was a revelation. The experienced student moved like a machine, sharp, precise, rehearsed, but stiff, predictable. The beginner? He moved clumsily, but without fear, without expectation. And then it happened. The seasoned student began to falter. His movements slowed, his breath shortened, and for the first time, he dropped the performance. His body relaxed, his strikes softened, his reactions became real. Suddenly, he wasn't trying to be strong. He was just moving. And in that moment, he was the most powerful I had ever seen him. That's the paradox. Strength, when pursued, creates resistance, but when abandoned, reveals capacity. The collapse of strength is not your end. It is your rebirth. Chapters 7 to 10 continue. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 7 onward in the same expanded and poetic style? Chapter 7. The Darkest Moment. The Brightest Truth. When I hurt my back, I was told I might never fight again. I was confined to a bed, trapped in stillness, and in that enforced silence, I heard something. I heard my mind. I began to train not with my limbs, but with imagination. I threw kicks in my head. I practiced flows in silence. And when I returned to movement, I was faster, sharper, not because I gained strength, but because I shed something. The need to be strong had been burned away. That injury, that powerlessness, was my greatest teacher. Pain strips away your defenses. It forces you to examine what's beneath the armor. I found clarity, not by standing tall, but by lying flat, unable to move, forced to feel. This clarity wasn't born of suffering. It was born of surrender. In stillness, I learned how to move. In silence, I learned how to speak. In emptiness, I learned the shape of fullness. And I discovered that all I needed was already within me, waiting for me to stop trying so hard to become what I already was. Chapter 8. Water doesn't try. Water flows. It does not fight. It does not resist. It moves through, around, under, always adapting, always continuing. When I say, be water, my friend, I'm not being poetic, I'm being literal. In martial arts and in life, we often try to overcome, to conquer, but water doesn't conquer, it transforms. It finds the path of least resistance not because it's weak, but because it's free. It is strong not in opposition, but in surrender. And from that surrender comes ultimate resilience. I've watched rivers erode mountains, watched oceans embrace storms. I've seen puddles reflect stars. Water teaches us that movement is not just direction, it's intention. That flexibility is not compromise, it's courage. Being water means understanding that softness defeats hardness. That emptiness can contain everything. That what bends does not break. To be water is to accept change, to welcome it, to become it. Chapter 9. Modern applications, beyond the dojo. These ideas aren't confined to combat. Everyday life is its own kind of sparring. The boardroom, the classroom, the kitchen table, these are modern arenas. And we enter them armored in ego, in performance, in a desire to control. But what if we stopped trying to be strong in arguments? What if we flowed instead of fought? What if we listened rather than attacked? In relationships, we try to hold power, who's right, who's in control, but real love flows. It adjusts, it adapts, it forgives, it learns. At work, we try to assert, impress, dominate, but leadership isn't about command. It's about resonance. The best leaders are like water, supportive, flexible, clear, and in ourselves, the inner conflict, the quiet battles. Strength often becomes resistance to truth, but peace comes when we let truth pass through us, like water through open hands. Be water, at work, in love, in uncertainty. Surrender is not defeat, it's the courage to trust, to move without knowing exactly how things will unfold. To be water is to give up the need to force, and instead to align. Chapter 10. Breaking the final barrier. Strength is the last illusion, the final enemy, because as long as we chase it, we deny what we already have, the ability to move with life. Not against it, to respond instead of react, to surrender the ego and uncover the soul. This podcast isn't about fighting, it's about freedom. Freedom from the trap of always needing to be something powerful, dominant, invincible. Let those go, and you'll find what's left is something purer, something real, not strength, but power, not force, but flow. I've seen martial artists train for decades, building towers of technique and discipline, but the tallest towers cast the longest shadows. And when you stand too tall in your strength, you lose touch with the ground. To break through this illusion, you must go down, not up. You must sink. You must soften. You must release. This is your final challenge, to become less, so you can be more. To stop trying to be powerful, so you can allow power to move through you. Remember, water doesn't resist gravity. It rides it. It does not fear the fall, because it knows how to land. Be water, my friend. The rest will follow.